KREM 2 News begins now.
It's been a busy week for news across the inland Northwest. Let's get you caught up with the KREM 2 News Week in Review. I'm Tim Pham. Thanks for joining us here on KREM 2 Plus. Here now is a look at some of the biggest stories from this past week.
Tonight, City Council approved a $500,000 settlement to the fiancé of a Spokane man who Spokane police shot multiple times. Council didn't discuss the decision, but took public comment on the matter. This is the moment Spokane police shot and killed Robert Bradley on September 4th, 2022. This body cam video from the police department shows officers approaching the van Bradley was in. They able to see his hands, and a few seconds later, officers fired, hitting and killing Bradley. Police said they shot Bradley because they thought he was reaching for his weapon, and police say Bradley never fired any shots. KREM 2 spoke with his fiancée, Sarah McLaughlin, shortly after his death. She says they were unloading their car after camping, and Bradley was bringing his guns inside from his van.
He wasn't just wandering around with a gun in his hand. He was just loading stuff in and out like you do after your camping trip, you know?
The Spokane County Sheriff's Office led an independent investigation following this shooting. Then the county prosecutor concluded the shooting was justified, meaning the officers who fired their guns would not face any criminal charges. McLaughlin filed a wrongful death lawsuit in August last year, arguing her fiancé's death was not justified. After a mediation in December, McLaughlin agreed to dismiss her claims for the amount of $500,000. In tonight's City Council meeting, Will Hewlings spoke against the settlement. He believes the investigation shows the police shooting was justified.
That the officers acted in self-defense, and I applaud them for their quick and decisive actions in what was clearly a life-threatening situation.
Jim Leedy spoke in support of the lawsuit. He believes the circumstances leading to Bradley's death weren't justified and are worth more than the amount voted on.
What happened with Robert Bradley was unacceptable. I support the settlement. In fact, it should be doubled.
Council voted 5-2 approving the $500,000 settlement. There is still another lawsuit filed against the city of Spokane relating to Robert Bradley's death. The wrongful death lawsuit was filed in March of last year on behalf of Bradley's 2 children and his estate. Their attorney shared a statement on the family's behalf. It says, in part, "We believe police were negligent and reckless in shooting Mr. Bradley. Mr. Bradley's 2 young boys lived with their father and were close to him. The children are sad that the city has chosen to settle with the fiancé of Robert Bradley while refusing to acknowledge the children's damages and pain in a fair and reasonable manner. The settlement proves that the city recognizes the Spokane police did something wrong in this case." The family's attorney goes on to say the federal trial for the lawsuit is set for November 12th, and they're seeking $50 million in damages if the case goes to trial. Connor McAvoy, KREM 2 News.
We just learned this week the family of a man shot and killed by Spokane officers inside a Walmart plans to sue. That's in addition to a federal lawsuit from a separate family, and there's possible legal action in another police shooting from weeks ago. So we wanted to know, when deadly force at the hands of the law turns into a legal battle, what are the damages? The family of Carrie Jones Hilberg put the city on notice Tuesday. They plan to sue for $50 million.
Sometimes the only thing that makes the police change their behavior are large jury verdicts, quite frankly.
Attorney Rondi Thorpe also represents 2 other families of people killed by Spokane officers.
Spokane police, let me see both your hands. Let me see both your hands.
Robert Bradley was shot in 2022 while police were trying to serve a protection order. His children are asking for $50 million in a federal case.
We remember them.
The city just settled a separate lawsuit from Bradley's fiancée, paying out $500,000. Just one in a number of high-dollar settlements for deadly force. Thorpe's office also represents the family of Joshua Musselman, shot by Spokane officers December 29th. No legal action has been filed in that case so far.
Why are you trying to shoot me? If you shoot me, you're going to hit him too.
Last June, Spokane City Council approved a $250,000 settlement with the family of Peterson Como. The family's original tort claim was $23 million.
11 seconds from when you guys said Spokane police until you shot my brother. 11 seconds. Who can react in 11 seconds?
Thorpe's also behind the largest wrongful death settlement in city history. when Spokane paid David Novak's family $4.8 million. Novak was shot by police in 2019 outside his home. Officers reported they thought he had a gun. It was a baseball bat. But in all these cases, at least where a decision has been reached, the county prosecutor hasn't filed any criminal charges against officers. That's rare.
Mr. Zem did not lose his life in vain. Think of what has happened since that tragic event.
In fact, one of the only cases where an officer did end up a defendant, the 2006 beating death of Otto Zem. Carl Thompson was convicted of using excessive force and lying to investigators. The city settled the case for just under $1.7 million. The Department of Justice investigated, ordering SPD to change training and internal reviews. As for a cumulative amount on how much police shooting lawsuits have cost the city and taxpayers, that data wasn't readily available when we asked for it. A city spokesperson told me to make a formal public records request, which I did, and we were told the city is self-insured and has excess insurance to cover cases like this. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
This is the unit where Spokane police shot and killed a man in his apartment just before New Year's Day. It's a scene many neighbors remember happening, including one we spoke with who says the death was far too close for comfort. Neighbors in the Northcliffe Terrace apartments remember the day their neighbor died in a police shooting.
He lives directly above me in this other unit right here.
Anmore Peace recalls the day Spokane police shot and killed his upstairs neighbor, Joshua Musselman.
I was in my living room area when the shots rang out.
Spokane police responded to the complex on December 29th for a reported shooting. Initial reports say a man was shooting rounds out of his apartment. Chief Kevin Hall believes up to 4 officers fired their weapons, killing Musselman.
Every day now I walk out and I see the aftermath of police bullets.
Peace, who also serves on the Spokane City Human Rights Commission, believes the tragedy could have been avoided had a behavioral health unit been on scene.
They're a team that really has empathy and understanding of these kind of situations. And I've never seen that team have to use force.
Musselman's sister retained attorney Rondi Thorpe for potential legal action against SPD. Thorpe says the family wants to pursue a wrongful death lawsuit her office is currently investigating, but says it's too soon to say if a claim will be filed. Thorpe says Musselman was a mentally ill man who needed resources he never had the chance to get.
My heart goes out to the Musselman family.
As Peace processes the loss of his neighbor, he hopes efforts by the family could lead to change. We're still waiting for SPD to release the names of the officers who shot at Musselman. We'll provide that information as it becomes available. In Spokane, Connor McAvoy, KREM 2 News.
Welcome back to the KREM 2 News Weekend Review. I'm Tim Pham. Let's get back now to some of the biggest news stories from the Inland Northwest this past week.
Governor Little is recommending lawmakers support several investments in education, infrastructure, and public safety. As Idaho Governor Brad Little enters his 6th year in office, he's making big promises, what he calls his Keeping Promises plan.
There is no doubt Idaho's on a roll.
One of Little's major priorities in the new year, what he calls a continued trend of tax relief.
We promised Idahoans historic tax relief and delivered back-to-back tax cuts.
He's proposing $100 million in additional tax cuts. Education is another key priority. Little says the public charter school system offers families more options, transparency, and accountability. He's recommending a $50 million revenue adjustment for more education options.
I recognize the growing desire to expand school choice, especially for students with unique physical or developmental conditions.
Little says this system will not take money from public schools, which he says is his first funding priority. He's promised $150 million for public schools. But Idaho's Education Association expressed disappointment at the private school voucher plan. A statement from President Lane McAnally says, in part, rather than siphoning public tax dollars for-profit, private, or religious schools, we should invest in the future of our children by finally ending the state's chronic underfunding of education. Little says since he took office, Idaho's crime rate has gone down 17%.
My Keeping Promises plan includes the addition of a new prosecutor in North Idaho who will solely focus on putting away drug traffickers.
$85,000 will fund the new Special Assistant U.S. Attorney in Coeur d'Alene, focused on the drug trade along I-90 and Highway 95. You can watch the governor's full address right now on KREM 2+. Shannon Mowdy, KREM 2 News.
Last month, outgoing Governor Jay Inslee proposed a new tax on the state's wealthiest residents. But today, Governor-elect Bob Ferguson said he was skeptical that would work. Instead, he wants state agencies to first look at areas that could be cut.
Female 3702, she's right.
Washington state agencies handle everything from fish hatcheries to prisons and parks, providing services of all kinds and jobs to thousands of state workers.
Budget priorities.
Incoming Governor-elect Bob Ferguson wants to find savings in those services. To help fill a potential $12 billion budget gap over the next 4 years, Ferguson is asking state agency heads to come up with cuts of 6%, 3% for higher education institutions. The only exceptions, K-12 and public safety programs and agencies. Ferguson says new taxes need to be the last resort. Would college tuition rise? How many state employees would be laid off? Ferguson says he doesn't know yet.
I recognize that's not going to be easy for agencies, but we can all be more efficient and more streamlined, and that's the type of approach we need to make before we even start having a conversation about any kind of taxes.
We can solve this with some responsibility and priorities of government and making sure that we don't spend more than we're projecting to take in revenue.
Republican Representative Travis Couture likes what the incoming governor is proposing. But Democrats in the House and Senate say for the state to continue to serve its residents, fully fund education, provide clear culverts for salmon, and build and maintain roads, taxes may be inevitable this year.
We will have to do those hard looks at the budget and be values-based as we do that and priorities-based. But in the end, it is very hard for me to imagine that we won't end up needing to look at some sorts of revenue.
Democratic Representative Jake Fye said he may propose a gas tax increase to help pay for some of the state's road projects. A new Cascade PBS Elway poll released today suggested that 2/3 of Washington voters would prefer budget cuts to tax increases to balance the budget. In Olympia, Drew Mickelson, King 5 News.
As you can see around me, there isn't much going on here in Latah Valley, but that's all subject to change come summertime of this year.
The Washington State Department of Natural Resources has officially got the ball rolling to exchange land here in Spokane County. This comes after the State Board of Natural Resources voted on Monday to approve the exchange of nearly 200 acres of Spokane County land to Blue Fern Management, LLC, which is a Redmond, Washington development company. This property in Latah Valley is dedicated to funding K-12 education across the state. However, DNR says this land isn't producing enough money consistently for long-term funding.
With this exchange, we will be increasing the amount of revenue that's used to fund that K-12 education trust.
Ryan Rodruck, the state lands communication manager, says DNR is legally obligated to provide revenue to trust beneficiaries.
With this exchange, we have the opportunity to acquire land that is going to generate significantly more.
But what is being given to Blue Fern Management LLC through this exchange is being taken away from local community members.
I think the community has been very clear with what they want.
That is why Councilmember Paul Dillon brought forth a resolution that requested a 6-month delay for the transfer last month to be able to work out a compromise for everyone involved.
I do think that there's more that we can do to collaborate.
Councilman Dillon says the community has raised multiple concerns to City Council about the land exchange, one of which is the infrastructure of the area.
This is one piece, I think, of a much bigger picture.
A concern that DNR is aware of.
It is the intended use by the developer of that Thorpe property to improve that with housing, with parks, and with that comes road infrastructure. So indeed, it will actually facilitate us fighting fire faster.
Councilmember Dillon says the plan moving forward is to work with the developer to come up with the best possible outcome for the community.
And the only way that we're going to do that is working together.
The Washington State Department of Natural Resources say the closing date on this land transaction is on July 15th. In Latah Valley, Christian Garza, KREM 2 News.
A local pharmacy chain known as Medicine Man in North Idaho, which is where I'm at right now, says 8 days into this new law and PBMs are still inflating prices.
I am told PBMs are third-party companies, the middleman between the insurance carrier and pharmacies. Health officials say since they control the prescription transactions, they can accept rebates from manufacturers, which then inflates the price of the drug. In a 2024 article from the Pharmaceutical Care Management Association, author Ike Brannon, who opposes the new legislation, says constraining PBMs would neither reduce the amount of money health plans spend on prescription drugs nor improve health outcomes. In fact, some of the proposals being considered at the state level would directly increase costs and effectively reduce drug adherence, leading to predictable, costly, and negative health outcomes. But in North Idaho, co-owner of Medicine Man, Corey Kreider, says they are still seeing high prices, even with the new law in effect.
We did just a quick little sample of how much we lost, and it was $1,200 on name brand medications. And if you were to extrapolate that over a year, we're losing anywhere close to $100,000.
And that $1,200, I am told, was just in one day. Kreider says these costs are the reason why so many pharmacists have been forced to close. Idaho's District 3 representative, Jordan Redmond, says PBMs who are not following the new law claim they did not know or realize this law went into effect. I did reach out to CVS Caremark, Optum Rx, and Express Scripts for a response, but have yet to hear back.
As state leaders are now in legislative session, pharmacies like Medicine Man are interested to see how they will enforce the law and create stiffer penalties on PBMs. In Hayden, Regan Gallo, KREM 2 News.
There's always just a ton of innovation and new technology that's coming out to really mitigate your risk.
Mitigating risk is the name of the game in backcountry winter sports.
With the right risk assessment in place, you can have a great time.
Mike Levance is a volunteer with the Bogus Basin Ski Patrol who's been skiing the backcountry slopes for close to a decade. He says there's several new devices that can help protect people exploring off the beaten path.
The biggest safety things are some tools that people probably aren't familiar with.
Most recently, Sawtooth Avalanche Center says a snowmobiler's life was saved by an airbag device that he pulled while buried under an avalanche.
Basically, that is a device that's in your backpack that deploys and creates a system so that you can float above an avalanche in hopes that you don't get buried.
Levance has another version of an airbag, one that's built right into his backpack.
My backpack has what's called the Safe Back avalanche system. If I pull this handle here, basically it pulls air from the snow so that if you're buried, it can cycle air into your general area so you can actually breathe while you're buried.
While these advanced safety systems can make a big difference, there are basic tools Levance says every explorer should carry: a probe, a shovel, and a beacon.
This emits a signal that allows someone to find you if you're buried in an avalanche, or it allows you to find someone.
Those tools are good for people when they're in a bind, but Levance says you should also check the region's avalanche report online before heading up the mountain. Always go with a buddy, and of course, take the proper training courses.
There's a number of educational classes and seminars that they put on just to give everyone a baseline level of getting out and experiencing it for themselves for the first time.
He says it's the only way to stay safe while enjoying Idaho's outdoor playground.
Idaho's a great place to be, especially for backcountry snow sports. You can have a great time in the great outdoors and not have to subject yourself to the lift lines on a powder day.
Thank you for joining us here on KREM 2 Plus. For the KREM 2 News Weekend Review, remember, you can always watch our latest newscast and weather forecast right here on KREM 2 Plus. Just click on the video in the bottom navigation menu. I'm Tim Pham. Thanks for watching.